Hello, this is Matt on the Moon Lambo channel, and according to an article from Finance Feeds, the Ripple and SEC are making progress, at least on one issue. Now, what I'd really like to see them make progress on, to be perfectly honest with you, and I am being honest, damn it, I'm a truth teller, I would love to see them make progress on a settlement. And look, I don't think technically those conversations ever ended, not technically, of course. But if that type of conversation is going on to any degree in the background, we would never be privy to that information, and it would not impact the timeline for how things are unfolding. So when there are deadlines set by the court specifically for anything, both parties still have to meet those requirements despite anything else that's going on. And so not that I'm expecting a settlement anytime soon necessarily. I think really you're going to have to wait until probably the discovery process is complete, until maybe you see one, because that's when both sides know how much ammo the other side has, effectively. Now, when that happens, then you might see, but that's why it would not be surprising, if at least it comes up from time to time, or they're talking about it to some degree. But yeah, that's the type of progress I personally would like to see. So I want to talk about that, and also there is this. From Cointelegraph, they talk about, well, a bunch of media outlets covered. I just pulled up the one from Cointelegraph, but it's an article about the SEC delaying another ETF decision, a Bitcoin ETF. And it's just unfortunate. You know, we talk about on this channel all the time how the SEC, being the asshats that they are, just in general, not literally all of them, but just in a general sense, the attorneys at least, and maybe Clayton, Mr. Clayton there, they don't like to make tough decisions, it seems. They like to kick the can down the road, and it's not surprising in the least for me to see yet another delay for a Bitcoin ETF, because this has been happening for years and years and years on end, and the SEC is running out of excuses, which I shall highlight here, but this is just what they do. The SEC doesn't want to provide clarity for the space, and they don't want to do anything to allow additional adoption, not really, for the crypto space, because if something happens for any of these higher up SEC folks and it goes wrong after they approve something, it's their necks. And it's not just me that is speculating that's the reason why. Hester Peirce, who is an SEC commissioner, she has said that publicly, which is why I think that she's probably not very popular within the SEC, but she's definitely very popular in crypto communities. I will say that. Now, to be clear, I don't have a legal or financial background of any kind. I am not offering legal or financial advice. And you definitely should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say or write. I'm just an enthusiast who likes making YouTube videos as a hobby. James Filan shared this document, which was part of this piece here, and it was about a postponement. So I'll just go ahead and jump into the piece here. Here we go. The parties plan to have additional meet and confer discussions in the next few days to further narrow and resolve the issues relating to Mr. Hinman's deposition. Now, at this point, I'm going, for the sake of the timeline for this video, I'm going to have to assume that you are caught up to speed on what is happening with the deposition of William Hinman, so I won't be speaking about that here. The deposition of William Hinman, other than it's covered in the article. The deposition of William Hinman, ex-SEC Director of Corporation Finance, has been postponed to July 27, 2021. Both parties have agreed to schedule the high-profile testimony after making substantial progress in narrowing and resolving the privilege issues, according to the letter sent to Judge Sarah Knepper. Now, writing on behalf of both the Plaintiffs' Securities and Exchange Commission and defendants, Ripple Labs' Brad Garlinghouse and Chris Larson, the document said the following, and here's a quote. At your direction, the parties met and conferred this morning on the privilege issues that arose during yesterday's hearing on the motion to quash the deposition of William Hinman. Based on this morning's discussions, we have agreed to adjourn the July 19th, 2021 deposition of Mr. Hinman and have rescheduled the deposition for July 27th, 2021. And so pushing things down a little bit further, not surprising at least, considering that that Ripple and the SEC not going to agree on a whole lot of anything here, although the judge, I can appreciate the fact that she's trying to force them to figure this out. I can certainly respect that. But the idea of privilege, what's being pushed here, because look, William Hinman, former SEC director, he is going to have to answer questions under oath. He's going to have to answer questions posed by Ripple's attorneys. And so then there's this issue of privilege, because William Hinman, being a higher up at the SEC when he worked there anyway, he was privy to all sorts of information that the outside does not and should not know, frankly. And so he can only answer so many questions. It is actually a legitimately fair point. He shouldn't be answering questions that if it's not specific to the Ripple and SEC case, and or if it potentially, even if it relates, if it would have some sort of disastrous effect, maybe there would be an argument there, but that would be for the judge to decide, frankly. But other than that, I still think, by and large, any question that's levied by Ripple's attorneys here having to do with Ethereum and XRP, the decision-making process for how he and the SEC decided that Ethereum and Bitcoin were not securities, but XRP, something's wrong there. Anything along those lines, they should be fair game, but the SEC, they're going to even try and stop those types of questions. You know it. They're not going to. They won't let Ripple attorneys ask William Henman what his freaking favorite color is on the grounds of privilege. You can count on that. Here's another quote. The parties have made substantial progress in narrowing and resolving the privilege issues and plan to have additional meet and confer discussions in the next few days to further narrow and resolve the issues relating to Mr. Hinman's deposition without waiver of any party's rights, including any rights under federal, and then they cite whatever that provision is there. With the court's permission, we propose to notify the court by 5 p.m. on Monday, July 19th, 2021, as to the status of our discussions and, if further judicial intervention is necessary, to propose a briefing schedule to resolve any outstanding issues. And so they're acknowledging right there that Ripple and the SEC might not be able to come to terms on what types of questions can even be broached here during this deposition. And so I don't know. It would be neat if they could actually figure it out on their own. I'm not necessarily convinced. And if they can't, I'm willing to bet it's because the SEC is being unreasonable. That would be my suspicion at this point, because they're not acting in good faith and they are not ethical people, and I don't respect them. The SEC versus Ripple lawsuit has clearly caught the eye of the public, so much that the judge took that and the precedent-setting nature of the case as exceptional circumstances that justify ordering for the deposition of the former high-ranking government official. Yeah, and so I actually shared, so there are a couple of things that were being considered leading up to whether or not William Henman would end up having to speak under oath, including the nature of him being high-ranking and whether or not there were extreme circumstances that would call for a high-ranking official actually being put under oath. And then on the topic of whether or not he's high-ranking, the judge said yes. The SEC also said yes. Ripple said no. And so I've shared a number of times on the channel, my opinion doesn't mean anything, but I subjectively not having proper context for this, and I do acknowledge that, but it just struck me how high he is, given that there's only like a couple people above him in the entire organization. William Henman struck me as what I would just, without knowing anything further, I would have just called him a high-ranking official. That's not good because the bar's higher to get high-ranking officials under deposition, so I can understand why Ripple argued what they argued here. So even though the judge agreed actually with that, the reason this still went through, one of the important reasons is that the judge acknowledged publicly that what's happening here, these are extreme circumstances, and that there's extreme public interest and importance around this. And just the fact that like you and I and the 4,000 people that were on the call for this hearing the other day, and so many other people, over 17,000 people being represented by John Deaton, he's seeking to intervene in the SEC versus Ripple case. And millions of people have bought XRP the world over, only a small percentage of them in the United States. And so these are extreme circumstances. Something like this has frankly never happened before. And so because of that, that was a primary reason that William Henman is going to be deposed. He's going to speak under oath. Now on to this next piece. From Cointelegraph, although again, like I said, it was covered everywhere. SEC delays another ETF decision. Now, an exchange-traded fund, and what we're talking about here specifically would be a Bitcoin exchange-traded fund, but just in general, an exchange-traded fund, it's a fund that can represent a number of different things. It could be an index within the stock market. It could be an entire asset class. It could be specifically precious metals. It could be a number of different things, but it's a fund that holds those things. It actually holds them, and then there's the fund itself is what's actually traded on an exchange. That's why it's called an exchange-traded fund. So the fund itself is composed of whatever they decide to compose it of, and then it's called exchange-traded because the fund is traded on exchanges. So they're actually, speculators are actually speculating on the price of the fund itself, which has underlying assets. So they're not buying the assets inside of it; they're buying the fund which is composed of whatever assets it's composed of, basically. So hopefully that makes sense here. And so what we're talking about here is having a Bitcoin exchange traded fund. So this way people could get exposure to Bitcoin, and Bitcoin would actually have to be held. That's part of the deal. Because we're not talking about a futures contract. That would just be betting on the price, the future price of Bitcoin. But in this case, you're talking about what is actually being held in the fund, right? And so that affects supply and demand. And then you're talking about all sorts of people that maybe if like the concept of crypto, it's on the periphery for them, they just haven't taken the initiative to set up a Coinbase account or get exposure in any way, any additional way, whatever. Well, these people, if it's now suddenly traded where they're already buying and selling stocks, if it's easy and it's just a fund and they don't have to do anything else, and they don't have to worry about custody, well, you can imagine what they would do in terms of opening up the floodgates. And then the narrative around that, perhaps, maybe that actually would do something. Like, that's big enough news, perhaps, that would push the price up. Now, usually I think news doesn't matter. It's more like price happens and then news is attributed to it. But sometimes it's the flip of that. So it could certainly happen here. But the SEC would have to approve a Bitcoin exchange-traded fund, and they're just not doing it. And so check this out. An approved Bitcoin exchange-traded fund, or ETF for short, continues to elude the United States. This week, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, or SEC, postponed its decision on WisdomTree's Bitcoin ETF, looking for comments from the public on the product, something the Commission has done in the past regarding Bitcoin ETF proposals. The Commission requests that interested persons provide written submissions of their views, data, and arguments with respect to the issues identified above, as well as any other concerns they may have with the proposal, the SEC detailed in a public document. And so here's what we've seen over the last X number of years that entities have been pushing for this. There's all sorts of entities that have been trying to get their own ETF out there, and they've all failed to this point, because there will be a deadline set for where the SEC must make a call, and then they apply an extension, but there's a limit to how many extensions there are, and then after they hit the limit of the number of extensions, then they finally say no. That's historically what has happened every single time. And so Hester Peirce doesn't so much like this. Like, here's an article from July 2nd of this year. The SEC should have approved a Bitcoin ETF a long time ago, regulator Peirce says, and this comes from CNBC. Hester Peirce is perplexed. And by the way, she's a commissioner. She's one of 5 commissioners that did vote on whether or not to bring the complaint against Ripple in December. I'm guessing, if just for fun guess, based on other stuff I've seen from her, I'm willing to bet that she didn't vote in favor of it, but you don't know for sure. We will find out at some point in the future once this case is all settled or fully adjudicated. But anyway, for years, the Securities and Exchange Commission, of which Peirce is a member, has denied applications by the nation's exchanges and financial firms to list securities that track the performance of popular digital currency Bitcoin. Earlier, say 10 years ago, concerns about potential market manipulation and liquidity may have made sense, but things have changed. That is probably the biggest, the most often asked question that I get. When will the SEC approve a Bitcoin exchange-traded product? Commissioner Peirce said in an interview with CNBC on Thursday. I thought that if we had applied our standards as we have applied them to other products, we would already have approved one or more of them, she said. With each passing day, the rationale that we have used in the past for not approving seems to grow weaker. Indeed, and so this is what I was talking about, the SEC kicking the can down the road because it's their next. If something unforeseen goes wrong, they don't want to deal with it. And again, that's not just my suspicion. Hester Peirce has publicly stated that, which is why I suspect that is indeed accurate. She's not just going to make bogus claims like that. The way that she strikes me is not the type of person that is going to emotionally throw bombastic claims out there. I think that she's rather logical and articulate, and she states things the way that she sees them. That's the way that I'm reading her. And so, and then she, especially if you consider this, understand that, and then understand the lack of clarity that the SEC has provided for the crypto asset class on the whole, because they want to regulate through enforcement. Clearly, they are. You put those together, this is not a stretch to believe, right? I think this is perfectly reasonable speculation. So anyway, the SEC applies a unique, heightened standard to filings related to digital assets, she wrote in 2020. And she has argued that the agency is asking exchanges and would-be ETF sponsors for assurances beyond what it asks for traditional equity-based products. And here's a quote. People of a regulatory mindset, when they encounter something new like this, say, oh, wait a minute, the market for Bitcoin looks a bit different than the markets we're used to, Purse said Thursday. Now, she added, the Bitcoin market looks more like an established market that has more participation from institutional and mainstream retail investors. So I think the markets have matured quite a bit, Purse said. And so there we are. And it's still, at some point it's going to happen because they cannot stop this forever as things get bigger and bigger and bigger, and the space becomes increasingly validated, and it becomes increasingly clear that this is not going away, which to me it's already crystal clear personally. You're at some point they're going to feel more foolish, so foolish that, not taking action, that feeling of looking foolish would be more harmful to them than taking the risk of launching an ETF. But also by then, maybe they'll feel like there's less risk anyway. So here we are. I'll wrap up there, though. I am not a financial advisor. You should not buy or sell anything because of anything that I say or write. That would be a very, very, very bad idea. Until next time, to the moon, Lambo.